This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. If you want Magic singles or sealed product, use my link in the description. Hi everyone, I'm Nietzahone, and with this video I'm wrapping up my Spider-Man and Through the Omenpaths set review. Over the last several days I've given you my thoughts on every single non-mono green card in the main set, and in this video we're going to take a look at those mono green cards, as well as the set's bonus sheet, a subset of cards that can occasionally appear in booster packs. For each of these cards, I'll discuss how I think they'll perform in limited, that means draft and sealed, and I'll punctuate each evaluation with a letter grade. If you're new to my set reviews and unsure of what my letter grades mean, you can find a guide in the description for the video. This is kind of a weird review since there are two different sets I'm reviewing at the same time, Spider-Man and Through the Omenpaths, in paper and on Arena, respectively, but the two are mechanically identical. I went deeper on this in the first video of the set review, but suffice it to say, I'm going to show both cards on the screen, but read the Spider-Man version of the card. In addition to that, there are some other things to keep in mind as I review these cards. First, because we're only talking about draft and sealed, I'm only going to be talking about cards that can be found in play boosters. This set has lots of supplementary products that have cards that won't be showing up in play boosters, like cards from the Eternal Legal set. So if there's a card you think is missing from this video, it's probably not in play boosters. These are also my evaluations of these cards before it's possible to play this new limited format, because the goal is to have my set review done in time for the pre-release, and that means I'll be wrong about some stuff, but as the format comes into focus, I'll be doing videos where I discuss how things have panned out. Lastly, I want to let you know that there are some set review related perks for being a channel member or a patron. You get access to my ongoing set notes during preview season, and you'll also get a spreadsheet with all of my grades once the set review is complete. If those perks interest you, check out the description where you can find out how to support the channel using one of those methods. Alright, without further ado, let's dive in with a look at the green cards in Spider-Man and Through the Omenpaths. First up, we've got Damage Control Crew, which for 3 generic and a green is a 3/3 human citizen at uncommon. When it enters, you choose one. You can return target card with mana value 4 or greater from your graveyard to your hand, or you can exile target artifact or enchantment. So Hill Giant stats are bad, and this is pretty narrow. There are going to be times where you can't trigger either of these, and that is going to feel really, really bad. I mean, at least you can add a creature to the board, I guess, but it's so woefully statted that if you can't get one of these triggers, it's terrible. Now that said, that first trigger is pretty interesting, especially because it lets you get any card with mana value 4 or greater. It's not as restricted on what kind of card you can get as we usually see these days in terms of card types. So as long as it has mana value 4 or greater, it can be an instant or sorcery or whatever, you can get it back, and being able to get back like removal as well as creatures and stuff like that is pretty good. And sometimes you're gonna have to hold on to this and not play it on turn 4 because you can get way more value if you wait a little while longer. And obviously if you can exile an artifact or enchantment, which is doable but not like insanely easy in the format because there just aren't that many targets, that's a 2-for-1 too. So it's a card that has 2-for-1 potential, and it's going to feel amazing when you can get either of these triggers, but they're both narrow enough that sometimes you won't. So this card puts me in kind of a weird spot in terms of grading it, because if you could get value with those two triggers every time you cast them, it'd be like a B+. But if it was just a 4-mana 3/3, it'd be a D- at best. So I think that makes it a C+. There are going to be times where it feels bad, but I think there are going to be enough times where it feels really good that it's a quality card. Next up, it's Ezekiel Sims' Spider Totem, which for 4 generic and a green is a 3/5 legendary spider human advisor at uncommon. It has reach, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, target spider you control gets +2/+2 until end of turn. So this can buff itself, making it a 5/7 reach on your next turn if you have nothing else going on, and that's probably a creature that can rumble pretty well on most boards. It gets even better if you have another spider around, and you are pretty likely to. There are a lot of them in the set and a lot of them in green, and that will make the first trigger feel like an enters trigger, and it's one that can seriously improve your turn. I'm giving this a C+. Next up, it's Grow Extra Arms, which for 1 generic and a green is a common instant that costs 1 generic less to cast if it targets a spider. Target creature gets +4/+4 until end of turn. 2 mana for +4/+4 is already a combat trick you play like one of in a lot of green aggressive decks in most formats, and sometimes this is only going to cost a single mana, which is going to feel like an upgraded Giant Growth, which itself is a quality trick. The nice thing about this kind of buff is that it allows just about any creature to punch above its weight. It can make almost any creature kill any other creature in combat because it's such a big buff. And it's also not terrible against a lot of removal. It can blink a variety of removal spells that do damage or -X, and that's nice too. It's still a trick, which means it's situational and you can't like jam a bunch of these into your deck and hope it works out, but it's a nice trick. I'm giving it a C. Next up, it's Guy in the Chair, which for 2 generic and a green is a 2/3 human advisor at common that taps for 1 mana of any color. And you can pay 2 generic and a green and then tap it and put a +1/+1 counter on target spider, activate only as a sorcery. I'm already in on a 3 mana 2/3 that taps for mana of any color. So the fact that this can throw counters on your spiders, usually in the later game, is really nice upside to add. I'm giving this a C+. Next up, it's Kapow, which for 2 generic and a green is a common sorcery. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. It fights target creature an opponent controls. So keep in mind, like most of these effects in the set, it's a fight effect, meaning your creature gets damaged too, making it significantly worse than the bite effect we see more frequently these days. That said, the counter is likely to help your creature punch above its weight class and take something down and survive. Just be careful about when you use this because interaction can absolutely obliterate you. I'm giving it a C+. Next up, it's Craven's Cats, which for 1 generic and a green is a 2/2 cat villain at common. You can pay 2 generic and a green and it gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Activate only once each turn. A 2 mana 2/2 isn't good these days, and while this can attack as a 4/4, sometimes that ability isn't worth using all that often. You can do it at instant speed, which is nice. Sometimes we see these restricted, so there is a threat of activation here where you can attack with this into your opponent's 3/3 and they just have to take it. And that's nice, but it still seems like a subpar 2-drop overall to me. I'm giving it a C-. Next up, it's Craven's Last Hunt, which for 3 generic and a green is a rare enchantment saga. Chapter 1 says, mill 5 cards. When you do, this saga deals damage equal to the greatest power among creature cards in your graveyard to target creature. Chapter 2 says target creature you control gets +2/+2 until end of turn. And Chapter 3 says return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So just Chapter 1 is a quality card. Green decks are often good with the graveyard and have big enough creatures for this to kill something a lot. And it doesn't end there. You get a lot of additional value. Chapter 2 isn't always going to do something meaningful, but it might give you a better attack or an attack you didn't even have before. And then Chapter 3 gives you another card worth of value. So you ultimately get a nice 2-for-1, starting with a removal spell that will have a big impact on the board and also loading your graveyard for value. And part of that value is being able to use Chapter 3 to get a creature back. And all of that's well worth 4 mana. This is going to turn a lot of games on its head. I'm giving it an A. Next up, it's Lizard, Connors' Curse, which for 2 generic and a green is a 5/5 legendary lizard villain at rare. It's got trample, and when it enters, up to 1 other target creature loses all abilities and becomes a green lizard creature with base power and toughness 4/4. This is like if Oko were a creature. Okay, I'm exaggerating, it's not quite that good, but you get what I'm saying here. The enters trigger will almost always give you value by buffing something of yours or by nerfing something of your opponent's. And you get that up front to go along with a 4 mana 5/5 trampling body. So I think you end up with a bomb here. You get more than a card worth of value, and you get a formidable creature that your opponent usually just can't ignore. And that's especially true if you just turned your 1/1 into a 4/4 that can attack right away. I'm giving this an A-. Next up, it's Lurking Lizards, which for 1 generic and a green is a 1/3 lizard villain at common. It's got trample, and when you cast a spell with mana value 4 or greater, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. This looks like a solid 2-drop. Adding counters to a 1/3 is surprisingly good, as the somewhat similar Sahagin recently taught us, since a 2/4 is capable of blocking so many things, and even killing them. This is harder to grow and easier to block than Sahagin, but I do think it's going to be a nice common. I'm giving it a C. Next up, it's Miles Morales, which for 1 generic and a green is a 1/2 legendary human citizen hero at Mythic Rare. When he enters, you put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. You can also pay 3 generic, a red, a green, and a white to transform Miles Morales, activate only as a sorcery. And this is also a modal double face card, so you can also pay that same mana cost when it's in your hand to cast Ultimate Spider-Man, legendary spider human hero, 4/3 with first strike and haste. You can pay 2 generic and put a counter on Ultimate Spider-Man, and he gains hexproof and becomes colorless until end of turn. And whenever you attack, double the number of each kind of counter on each spider and legendary creature you control. I am absolutely thrilled with a 2 mana 1/2 that puts 2 +1/+1 counters on the board, including potentially one on itself. That means that the floor here is a 2-mana 2/3, and most of the time he'll put a counter somewhere else too, augment a creature, and it can attack right away. That's already going to feel pretty close to a 2-for-1, just on this 2-mana card. Like, if this was just the 2-drop version of this card, it would be an amazing, amazing card. But it's way better, because he can also transform, take advantage of the counters that are on your board. He's got first strike and haste, so he's difficult to block, can attack right away, can gain counters with his own ability. Like, you can use that ability as many times a turn as you want to, assuming you have enough mana lying around. And it just ends up being completely insane. I think this might be the biggest bomb in the set, just because it's this modal double-face card where the front side is insane value and the back side is like a must-kill threat that augments your board even more. It just looks amazing to me. I think this is an A+. Next up, it's Pictures of Spider-Man, which for 2 generic and a green is an uncommon artifact. Whenever this artifact enters, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal up to 2 creature cards from among them and put them into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order, and you can pay 1 generic and sacrifice it to make a treasure token. This is usually going to draw you 2 cards, provided, you have 15 plus creatures in your deck, which is usually the norm. And doing that for 3 isn't terrible. It doesn't add to the board, but getting the treasure is nice, although it's more of a flavor play than anything, since you pay 1 mana and get 1 mana back. Sure, it can ramp you on a later turn and fix your mana, but most of this card's value is just being a 3-mana draw 2, and that's like a C. It would be way better in an Artifact Matters set, since it's 1 card that can give you 2, but this isn't really one of those. Next up, it's Professional Wrestler, which for 3 generic and a green is a 4/4 human warrior performer at common. When it enters, you create a treasure token, and it can't be blocked by more than 1 creature. We've seen lots of on-rate creatures that make treasure when they enter be pretty solid and limited, and this follows that example. It's a big body that gains you life, which is always a nice way to stabilize, and it's even kind of a pain for your opponent to block. Like, they have to have 1 creature that has at least 4 power, or they can't block this effectively and take it down. They just have to chump or take 4 every time it attacks. This looks like a pretty nice little common, giving it a C+. Next up, it's Radioactive Spider, which for 1 red mana is a 1/1 spider at rare with reach and death touch. You can pay 2 generic and sacrifice it to search your library for a spider hero card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle, activate only as a sorcery. So you can take reach and the activated ability away, and this is something you still play 100% of the time in green decks in any format, but especially this one because spiders have so many payoffs in this set. 1 mana Death Touchers just play really well. They can trade for anything. They can easily trade up. They cause all kinds of problems. And then you throw in the fact this has reach, which means it can even stop stuff in the air, and the fact that it can tutor up a spider hero, which might be one of the best cards in your deck because all of those are the various spider people, more generally, that are in the set. So you're going to be searching up something powerful when you do that, and it's just a great card as a baseline, giving this a B-. Next up, it's Sandman, Shifting Scoundrel, which for 1 generic and 2 green is a star legendary sand elemental villain at rare. His power and toughness are each equal to the number of lands you control. He can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less, and he can pay 3 generic and 2 green to return this card and target land card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So this is always going to feel like an efficient creature, one that's hard to block, and one that can be absolutely massive in the late game. That on its own would make this a B. But then he has this insane recursive ability. Now, because of the wording, you do need a land in your graveyard to bring him back. And while that's not automatic, it's not that hard for a green deck to fulfill that requirement. And that means when he comes back, he's usually giving you a 2-for-1 because of the land. Also worth noting that there's an Evolving Wilds variant in the set that just puts itself in the graveyard as part of its effect. And yeah, he does enter tapped when he comes back, but you can still use it at instant speed. Basically, he's a huge recursive creature with a bit of evasion, and there's no way that's not a bomb. I'm giving him an A. Next up, it's Scout the City, which for 1 generic and a green is a common sorcery. It says choose 1, mill 3 cards, you may put a permanent card from among them into your hand, you gain 3 life, or destroy target creature with flying. This is either a sorcery speed plummet or a nice way to load the graveyard and get a card back. Gaining life on that first effect is nice, as it makes it less painful to cast this on like turn 2 without adding to the board, giving this a C. Next up, it's Spider-Ham, Peter Porker, which for 1 generic and a green is a 2/2 legendary spider boar hero at rare. When it enters, you create a food token, and other spiders, boars, bats, bears, birds, cats, dogs, frogs, jackals, lizards, mice, otters, rabbits, raccoons, rats, squirrels, turtles, and wolves you control get +1/+1. So a 2-mana 2/2 that makes a food is a card you're always going to play in Limited. It's not quite a 2-for-1, but you do get more than a card worth of value out of it. And Spider Ham has tons of stuff to buff in this format, especially spiders, obviously. But there's also like a lot of lizards, some birds, some cats. I mean, there's things that are going to get buffed by this in basically every green deck, and it has a great baseline, so I think it's a B+. Next up, it's Spider-Man, Brooklyn Visionary, which for 4 generic and a green is a 4/3 legendary spider-human hero at common. It has web slinging for 2 generic and a green. That's an alternate casting cost that you can pay if you also return a tapped creature you control to its owner's hand. And when it enters, you search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. So a 5-mana 4/3 with this enters trigger and no web slinging at all would probably be like a C. It adds a significant enough body to the board and generates a 2-for-1 while fixing your mana, and it's hard to be like upset about that even when the stats are kind of not great. But then you throw in the whole web slinging thing, which can itself net additional value when you bounce the right things to your hand. Can also make sure you find the next land you really need ahead of schedule and stuff like that. So this ends up being a quality common, I think. I'm giving it a C+. Next up, it's Spider Rex, Daring Dino, which for 4 generic and 2 green is a 6/6 legendary spider dinosaur hero at common. It's got reach, trample, and ward 2. So this is the new Colossal Dreadmaw, and it's a nice top curve threat that is good on defense and offense and hard to kill super efficiently thanks to ward. You're going to play one of these in a lot of your green decks. I'm giving it a C. Next up, it's Spider's Man, Heroic Horde, which for 1 generic and a green is a 2/3 legendary spider hero at uncommon. It has web slinging for 4 generic and 2 green, and when it enters, if they were cast using web slinging, you gain 3 life and create 2 2/1 green spider creature tokens with reach. This looks amazing. It's not that far from being like Ishkana Graph Widow. You can run this out as a 2-mana 2/3, which is fine. And in the late game, casting this is going to feel incredible because you add so much to the board and gain so much life. If this was only the 6-mana version of this, where you get a 2/3 and 2 2/1s and you have to bounce a card to your hand and you gain 3 life and all of that, it would probably be a B- at least. You know, the setup of bouncing something to your hand is real. But then when you throw in the fact you can also run this out on 2 when you need to, and then maybe bounce it with something else that has web slinging, so you can cast it again later, has a useful creature type. There's just so much going on here that's great, that I think this is an incredibly powerful uncommon. I'm giving it a B+. Next up, it's Strength of Will, which for 1 generic and a green is a rare instant. Until end of turn, target creature you control gains indestructible, and whenever this creature is dealt damage, put that many +1/+1 counters on it. This can blank some removal while growing a creature, or it can make a creature win combat while growing, but there's still a lot of situations where it's not great. Like using this to make your chump blockers survive and then get bigger is a thing, but not often worth the card. Your creature has to already be capable of doing lethal to another creature for it to be worthwhile most of the time, and that and other decent situations will line up, but not often enough for this to be more than a C in Limited. Next up, it's Supportive Parents, which for 2 generic and a green is a 3/3 human citizen at uncommon. Tap 2 untapped creatures you control, add 1 mana of any color. A 3-mana 3/3 is fine, and this one can actually ramp and fix your mana, sometimes in a pretty big way if you've gone wide enough. It also helps set up web slinging, which is sweet, giving this a C+. Next up, it's Terrific Team Up, which for 3 generic and a green is an uncommon instant. This spell costs 2 generic less to cast if you control a permanent with mana value 4 or greater. 1 or 2 target creatures you control each get +1/+0 until end of turn. They each deal damage equal to their power to target creature an opponent controls. If this were always 4 mana, it'd be like a C+. It would be a little too clunky to be premium, even with the upside of letting you use 2 creatures to take something down, which not only mitigates against you getting blown out, it also makes it easier for your creatures to take down just about anything. But this will cost 2 mana with relative regularity in the mid to late game, and there are going to be instances where you can generate combat trick-like value out of this, since the stats boost plus the removal may let you get a pretty awesome 2-for-1. And if nothing else, your 2 creatures do hit harder for a turn. I think all of that makes this a B. Next up, it's Wall Crawl, which for 3 generic and a green is an uncommon enchantment. When it enters, you create a 2/1 green spider creature token with reach, then you gain 1 life for each spider you control. Spiders you control get +1/+1 and can't be blocked by creatures with Defender. So the baseline here is a 4-mana 3/2 with reach that gains you 1 life when it enters. That's not great, but this also offers a legit buff to your other spiders, which you're likely to have. Most green decks will have 5-ish, I would guess. And even once this buffs one other thing and gains 1 more life, it'll feel worth it. I'm giving this a C+. And the last green card and the last card in the main set in this set review is Web of Life and Destiny. For 6 generic and 2 green, it's a mythic rare enchantment with Convoke, which means your creatures can help cast it. Each creature you tap while casting this spell pays for 1 generic or 1 mana of that creature's color. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may put a creature card from among them onto the battlefield, put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. It's very, very important that this gives you a trigger the turn you play it, provided you played it in your first main phase, and you should, because that prevents it from being a card that doesn't add to the board right away. You're not always going to hit a creature that is worth the mana, but you will hit something almost every time, and you're going to keep on doing it every single turn, so this builds a huge advantage. Paying 6 for this seems very doable and like a great deal overall. It's a value engine that adds to the board right away, and those tend to be good, especially when you don't always have to pay 8. I think this ends up being a bomb, though the Convoke setup does limit just how amazing it can be, and I think it's only an A-. If it turns out it's even easier to get down way ahead of schedule, it'll be even better. All right, let's move now to the bonus sheet. This is a subset of cards that can appear in booster packs. In paper, one appears in every 24 booster packs. It's not entirely clear how often we're going to see them on Arena, but I would guess it will be about the same. They haven't made that clear as of when I'm recording this, but because they haven't said anything specific about it, I would assume it'll be the same. These are cards that are all reprints, and some of them are completely like reskins of cards as well, at least in paper. As usual, the bonus sheet ends up having a lot of cards that are duds because a lot of the time they're printing these cards more for Commander players and 60 card format players than they are for limited players. But there are some sweet cards for limited too. Let's dive in first with a look at Comeuppance, which for 3 generic and a white is a rare instant. Prevent all damage that would be dealt to you and planeswalkers you control this turn by sources you don't control. If damage from a creature source is prevented this way, Comeuppance deals that much damage to that creature. If damage from a non-creature source is prevented this way, Comeuppance deals that much damage to the source's controller. So most of the time damage prevention cards aren't very good in limited, and this one costs a whopping 4, but it has way more going on than your typical fog. For one thing, it's one-sided. That alone probably isn't enough to move the needle, but you know what is? Making opposing creatures take the damage they would do. That turns this into a removal spell of sorts, albeit a narrow one. It's still situational, and it's pretty expensive for a card that isn't always relevant, but the ceiling is through the roof. I'm giving this a C+. Next up, it's Leyline Binding, which for 5 generic and a white is a rare enchantment with Flash. It costs 1 generic less to cast for each basic land type among lands you control, and when it enters, you exile target non-land permanent opponent controls until this enchantment leaves the battlefield. This is going to cost 4 in most white decks, and it's an instant speed Oblivion Ring that will sometimes be even cheaper. This was good last time we saw it, and it'll be good here too, giving it a B+. Next up, it's 9 Lives, which for 1 generic and 2 white is a rare enchantment. It has hexproof. If a source would deal damage to you, prevent that damage and put an incarnation counter on this enchantment. When there are 9 or more incarnation counters on this enchantment, exile it. When this enchantment leaves the battlefield, you lose the game. This was terrible last time we saw it, and there's no reason it won't be here too. It's way too challenging to actually change the game with a card like this. Sure, you kind of slow stuff down, but you're only delaying the inevitable since you wasted your mana and a card like this, and your opponent is unlikely to have a problem making your 9 lives lose you the game. It's an F. Next up, it's Path to Exile, which for 1 white mana is a rare instant. Exile target creature, its controller may search their library for a basic land card, put that card onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. So 1 mana to exile a creature is amazing. Swords to Plowshares, incredible card. This is not Swords to Plowshares, though. Giving your opponent a land is a very real downside. Doing so means you 2-for-1 yourself, and it makes it kind of impossible to cast this effectively in the early game. Killing their 2-drop and ramping and fixing their mana, not exactly worth it. It does get good later when lands matter less and it can take down anything for 1 mana, but the big downsides here keep it from being a premium removal spell. It's really only one you can cast and feel good about by like the later stages of the game. I'm giving it a C+. Next up, it's Reprieve, which for 1 generic and a white is an uncommon instant. Return target spell to its owner's hand, draw a card. Bouncing a spell that's on the stack is sweet, and because you draw a card, you don't end up going down a card either. You're usually going to get tempo and a card. This was pretty good last time we saw it, and it will be here too, giving it a C+. Next up, it's Rest in Peace, which for 1 generic and a white is a rare enchantment. When it enters, you exile all graveyards, and if a card or token would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. This format doesn't have a prominent enough graveyard theme for this to even be worthwhile very often as a sideboard card, even with the Mayhem mechanic around. Using up an entire card on something that doesn't add to the board and hates on like 4 cards in your opponent's deck just isn't worth it. It's an F. Next up, it's Wedding Ring, which for 2 generic and 2 white is a mythic rare artifact. When it enters, if it was cast, target opponent creates a token that's a copy of it. Whenever an opponent who controls an artifact named Wedding Ring draws a card during their turn, you draw a card. Whenever an opponent who controls an artifact named Wedding Ring gains life during their turn, you gain that much life. So this does result in both players drawing lots of cards, but it also generally will mean you're behind because you're the one who cast this thing and gave your opponent a free value engine. I think this is an F. Next up, it's Clever Impersonator, which for 2 generic and 2 blue is a 0/0 shapeshifter that can enter as a copy of any non-land permanent on the battlefield. This is one of the best clones ever because it can copy any non-land permanent on the battlefield. A 4-mana clone that can only copy any creature on the battlefield is usually a quality card, and this one has a way higher ceiling because it can even go after, any kind of non-land permanent. Very easy to get your 4 mana's worth or more out of this. It's always going to be whatever the best permanent on the battlefield is, and that's pretty good, giving it a B+. Next up, it's Counterspell. It's 2 blue mana, rare, instant, counter target spell. We've seen this a lot in the recent past, and it's always pretty good. Double blue can be challenging and limited at times, but 2 mana to counter any spell is just a really good deal. You trade up all the time, giving it a B-. Next up, it's Lorthos the Tidemaker, which for 5 generic and 3 blue is an 8/8 legendary octopus at Mythic Rare. When it attacks, you can pay 8 generic. If you do, tap up to 8 target permanents. Those permanents don't untap during their controller's next untap steps. It's an 8 mana 8/8 that doesn't do anything until it attacks, and that can be a pretty big problem. Sure, the attack trigger can be nasty and is often worth the 8 mana, but he's too slow to be very good, giving him a D. Next up, it's Mindbreak Trap, which for 2 generic and 2 blue is a mythic rare instant trap. If an opponent casts 3 or more spells this turn, you may pay 0 rather than pay this spell's mana costs, and you exile any number of target spells. This was on the Thunder Junction bonus sheet, and it wasn't good. You're not going to cast this for 0 very often, nor is your opponent going to have a bunch of spells on the stack very often in Limited, so it's mostly a 4 mana counter spell that exiles the spell. That's effectively what it's going to feel like in Limited, and that's just not very good. It's a D. Next up, it's Mystic Confluence, which for 3 generic and 2 blue is a rare instant. Choose 3. You may choose the same mode more than once. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 3 generic. Return target creature to its owner's hand, or draw a card. Modal cards like this are so sweet. If you pay 5, counter a spell, bounce something, and draw a card, you're getting incredible value. A 2-for-1 and more. And because you can mix and match the modes, you're always going to have something worthwhile to do, even if you don't have something to counter. Casting this is just devastating most of the time. I'm giving it an A. Next up, it's Ponder. It's 1 blue mana for a common sorcery. Look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may put them back in any order. You may shuffle, draw a card. It's unfortunate this format doesn't really have a spell deck. This would be amazing if it did. As is, it's mostly just a quality card selection spell, and you can only run so many cards that don't add to the board in a format where there isn't really a payoff for casting cheap spells. Still, this is one of the cards that does always make the cut in your blue decks. I'm giving it a C+. Next up, it's Rite of Replication, which for 2 generic and 2 blue is a rare sorcery. It has Kicker for 5 generic. Create a token that's a copy of target creature. If this spell was kicked, create 5 of those tokens instead. Being able to clone any creature for 4 mana, like I said when talking about Clever Impersonator, that's already a good card. And if you ever draw this in the extreme late game, it's an instant win. I'm giving this a B. Next up, it's Traumatize. It's 3 generic and 2 blue for a rare sorcery. Target player mills half of their library, rounded down. Cards that are all in on mill are rarely good and limited, especially when they're this expensive. And this is also a mill card that can never even win you the game outright when you cast it, since it's capped at half a library. Spending 5 mana on this is a good way to lose in Limited when your opponent just untaps and plays something real for 5 mana. It's an F. Next up, it's Feed the Swarm, which for 1 generic and a black is a common sorcery. Destroy target creature or enchantment an opponent controls. You lose life equal to that permanent's mana value. This was quality removal when we last saw it, and it probably will be here too. It is worth noting that it was in a Theros set originally where there were lots of enchantment targets, and this time they aren't quite as plentiful. The downside does hurt sometimes, but for the most part, this does a solid job of removing stuff. I'm giving it a C+. Next up, it's Hex. For 4 generic and 2 black, it's a rare sorcery that says destroy 6 target creatures. So speaking as someone who played this card in draft back when original Ravnica came out, keep in mind you actually need 6 creatures to be on the board for this to even be castable, since it does not say up to. You have to have 6 targets for this or you can't cast it at all. That's definitely not automatic, especially because in an ideal world, you don't want to target your own creatures with this, although if you kill 5 of theirs and 1 of yours, that's obviously a good exchange. But still, most limited games don't have a plethora of situations where there are 6+ creatures on the board, and it's even less likely that your opponent alone controls those 6 creatures. Obviously, when they do, this is a game-winning, game-breaking effect, but this will be stuck in your hand a lot, and we have to take that into account. It makes it hard to go above a B- here. It's definitely good in long, drawn-out games where players are at parity, and can be good if you're behind, but that's not even a guarantee, since you can easily be behind without your opponent controlling enough creatures. Next up, it's Infernal Grasp, which for 1 generic and a black is an uncommon instant. Destroy a target creature, you lose 2 life. This is a very efficient way to deal with creatures, even with the life loss. Being an instant's a big deal too, giving it a B-. Next up, it's Opposition Agent, which for 2 generic and a black is a 3/2 human rogue at Mythic Rare. It has Flash. You control your opponents while they're searching their libraries. While an opponent is searching their library, they exile each card they find. You may play those cards for as long as they remain exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast them. This isn't really here for limited, like a lot of these cards. On occasion, maybe your opponent plays a card that searches their library for a land, but there simply aren't enough tutors and other effects around to warrant playing such an underwhelming creature. Sure, there's Radioactive Spider, but that's a rare, you're not going to see it very often. I guess if you see that your opponent has like 3 such cards in game 1, bringing it in out of the sideboard makes it an okay card at that point, but very few limited decks are going to even have 1 way to search their library for something, so it just ends up being a bad creature, and that's an F. Next up, it's Reanimate, which for 1 black mana is a rare sorcery. Put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. You lose life equal to its mana value. This is perhaps the best reanimation spell of all time, and we saw this powerhouse on the Thunder Junction bonus sheet, and I thought it was going to be amazing, but it kind of underperformed. 1 mana to reanimate any creature from any graveyard is a good deal, even if you do have to lose a bit of life to do it. However, you can't really bring back anything entirely absurd. Your deck isn't going to have Gristlebrand and the like in it, and as such, this only really ever ends up being a 1-for-1, albeit a flexible, efficient one, that can occasionally break the game wide open. Based on the win rate in Thunder Junction, this card's like a C-, but I'm willing to give this card the benefit of the doubt since it ends up being so efficient in so many situations, but not so much that I think it's better than a C+. Next up, it's Saw in Half, which for 2 generic and a black is a rare instant. Destroy target creature. If that creature dies this way, its controller creates 2 tokens that are copies of that creature, except their power is half that creature's power, and their toughness is half that creature's toughness. Round up each time. This is a weird card. It's very difficult for you to ever use this effectively as removal, as you kind of give your opponent a 2-for-1. Sure, the creatures are smaller, but they still get 2. Using this on your own creature is where the real value can be, but it's also not automatic. Like, turning your 2/2 into 2/1/1s isn't exactly game-breaking and definitely not worth the card. It gets a little more interesting when you use it on larger creatures, but it's still not really what you want to be doing. You can, of course, also use it on a creature in response to an opponent's removal spell, but we're still not talking about an effect that will feel worth it most of the time. Where it gets interesting is on creatures with enters or leaves or death triggers, as you can get them multiple times with this, but that's still too narrow of a use case for this to be something you always want in limited. I think it's a D. Next up is Skithiryx, the Blight Dragon, which for 3 generic and 2 black is a 4/4 legendary Phyrexian Dragon skeleton at Mythic Rare. It has flying and infect. You can pay 1 black to give it haste until end of turn, and you can pay 2 black to regenerate it. This was on the March of the Machine bonus sheet, and it was merely solid there. It's important to remember that Infect means this card can only do damage in the form of poison counters to opponents, and because the set doesn't have a poison theme, Skithiryx alone has to hit them 3 times before it matters, in which case it really matters, because you win the game. It is true that it's big, regenerates, and puts counters on creatures that it damages, so it isn't a terrible card by any stretch, but it's not the powerhouse lots of people will assume it is. It's just a C. Next up, it's Goblin Bombardment, which for 1 generic and a red is a rare enchantment. Sacrifice a creature. This enchantment deals 1 damage to any target. Now, this is a card we've seen on a bonus sheet before that is incredibly strong. Turning every one of your creatures into an instant speed ping is nuts. It can help you remove creatures or finish off the opponent, and it gets particularly interesting with any card that gives you multiple creatures to sacrifice. You do need creatures, of course, but this is so cheap and alters the game in a massive way. It performed like a bomb last time, and I think that'll be the case here too, giving it an A. Next up, it's Najeela the Blade Blossom, which for 2 generic and a red is a 3/2 legendary human warrior at Mythic Rare. When a warrior attacks, you may have its controller create a 1/1 white warrior creature token that's tapped and attacking, and you can pay 1 mana of each color, untap all attacking creatures. They gain trample, lifelink, and haste until end of turn. After this phase, there is an additional combat phase, activate only during combat. So this is another bonus sheet card from a set that we've seen on a recent bonus sheet. Anyway, Najeela counts itself, so when it attacks, you're going to get that 1/1, and that alone would make this a playable card. Bad news is, this set has only 3 other warriors, one of whom is rare, so that's really all you're getting out of this. A 3 mana 3/2 that makes a 1/1 tapped and attacking when it attacks, especially because producing 5 colors for other effects is pretty challenging, and I think that means she's a C. Next up, it's Relentless Assault, which for 2 generic and 2 red is a rare sorcery. Untap all creatures that attack this turn. After this main phase, there's an additional combat phase followed by an additional main phase. Cards that only give you extra combat steps are pretty bad and limited. They are only good when you already have a good attack, but even then, good is probably not quite good enough because it needs to be a great attack where several of your creatures also survive. This may as well be a blank card if you're behind, isn't good at parity, and even when you're ahead, it's not like it's the card you're looking for to close out the game. It's just not easy to abuse extra combat steps and limited, especially when that's all a card does. So I think this is an F, like virtually every card like it that we've ever seen. Next up, it's Savage Beating, which for 3 generic and 2 red is a mythic rare instant. Cast a spell only during combat on your turn. Choose one. Creatures you control gain double strike until end of turn, or untap all creatures you control. After this phase, there's an additional combat phase, and it has Entwined for 1 generic and a red, and if you pay that, you get both effects. I guess they really wanted us to have multiple extra combat steps on this bonus sheet. Anyway, like I just said, normally extra combat steps aren't good, but this does come with an entirely different mode, a double strike mode, and if you have 7 mana, getting both is kind of insane, because it makes almost any board scary and makes almost any extra combat step scary because double strikers are pretty much guaranteed to survive and inflict maximum carnage. Still, you have to have a ton of mana and a relatively built out board, so it's not amazing, although it is a lot better than Relentless Assault. I'm giving it a C+. Next up, it's Shock, which for 1 red mana is a common instant that does 2 to any target. So we have Shock in the main set and on the bonus sheet. I know the villain's name is the Shocker, and they felt like they had to do that, but still. Anyway, as is true of the main set's version of this, it's premium removal. 1 mana is a great deal for 2 damage. You trade up all the time, never feel bad to remove something with it, and you have the upside of going to the face, too. It's a B-. Next up, it's Thrill of Possibility, which for 1 generic and a red is a common instant. As an additional cost to cast it, discard a card, draw 2 cards. In a set with Mayhem, this gets a little better, although the best Mayhem enablers are the ones that don't cost you the mana to discard the turn you decide to discard them, since you're more likely to have mana left over for Mayhem, but this still looks solid, giving it a C. Next up, it's Unexpected Windfall, which for 2 generic and 2 red is a common instant. As an additional cost to cast it, discard a card, draw 2 cards, and create 2 treasure tokens. As good as this card is in 60-card formats, it was pretty disappointing in Forgotten Realms Limited, which is when it was originally printed, and there was a really good treasure deck in that format. While getting the treasure back is nice, you don't always have a way to take advantage of that in Limited, and it's pretty expensive for a card with the same basic effect as Thrill of Possibility, even when it does give you 2 treasure back. It does mean you can cast any Mayhem card you discard, provided it costs 2 or less mana for its Mayhem cost, but this still looks like a D to me. Next up, it's Winds of Change, which for 1 red mana is an uncommon sorcery. Each player shuffles the cards from their hand into their library, then draws that many cards. It's difficult to have any control over who this benefits more. In fact, since you're playing red, there's a good chance you don't have that many cards in your hand anyway, making this a lot worse. I think it's just an F. Next up, it's Arachnogenesis, which for 2 generic and a green is a rare instant. Create X 1/2 green spider creature tokens with reach, where X is the number of creatures attacking you. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn by non-spider creatures. It's tempting to look at a card like this and imagine it making a ton of spiders to ambush block your opponent and destroy them, and that is the ceiling. However, it's also a card that does nothing unless your opponent attacks you, and there are lots of situations where your opponent attacks with like 1 or 2 creatures, and at that point, it's not worth casting. Basically, it's as fiddly and inconsistent as a fog, but it does have the added upside of adding to the board and synergizing a bit with other spider stuff, although your opponent is also pretty likely to have lots of spiders, in which case it kind of does turn into fog. I think it's a D. Next up, it's Arasta of the Endless Web, which for 2 generic and 2 green is a 3/5 legendary enchantment creature spider at rare. It's got reach, and whenever an opponent casts an instant or sorcery spell, create a 1/2 green spider creature token with reach. A 4 mana 3/5 with reach is an okay baseline, and she has a useful creature type in this set. And because of her triggered ability, your opponent can basically never come out ahead of her, since most removal spells will give you a spider token, giving her a B. Next up, it's Beast Within, which for 2 generic and a green is an uncommon instant. Destroy target permanent. Its controller creates a 3/3 green beast creature token. This is not a good limited card. The most common situations result in you getting 2 for 1, either because you kill an opposing creature and leave a beefy token behind, or because you destroy your own thing to get a 3/3. It gets a little better if you have expendable targets in your own deck, but it's still a very hard card to come out ahead with. Stroke of Midnight is almost always an F in limited. We've seen that countless times. That's a card that's also good in Commander like Beast Within is, but none of that means these cards are good in limited because there aren't good enough targets for you to make this kind of exchange and feel like you're coming out ahead. So it's an F. Next up, it's Heroic Intervention, which for 1 generic and a green is a rare instant. Permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. This is powerful but highly situational. Most often in limited, it trades for a removal spell, which is fine, and it does occasionally produce some bigger blowouts or work kind of like a combat trick, but it's still too situational to be more than a C. Next up, it's Hunter's Insight, which for 2 generic and a green is an uncommon instant. Choose target creature you control. Whenever that creature deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker this turn, draw that many cards. This is yet another highly situational card. This one requires you to get a creature through unblocked, but your reward can be pretty substantial. Although if you're only drawing like 2 cards with it, you're just playing a situational divination, and that's not very good. The upside is real, but 9 times out of 10, you'd rather spend 3 mana on a 3/3, since the floor on that is so much higher, and the floor here is terrible, giving it a D. Next up, it's Parallel Lives, which for 3 generic and a green is a mythic rare enchantment. If an effect would create 1 or more tokens under your control, it creates twice that many of those tokens instead. We saw this on the Wilds of Eldraine bonus sheet, and in that set review, I gave it an F, and it turned out to be an F. It's just awful, because this is the kind of card that's great in a format like Commander. This is another card that's really good in Commander, but bad here, because you just can't build around it to the degree you need to make up for the fact that you're spending 4 mana to not add to the board at all. It's very hard to jump through the hoops it wants you to jump through, and it just ends up being an F. Next up, it's Silk Guard, which for X and a green is a rare instant. Put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to X target creatures you control. Auras, equipment, and modified creatures you control gain hexproof until end of turn. So the baseline here is a 2 mana instant that gives +1/+1 and hexproof to 1 creature. That's not great, but it's a passable trick that can be good against removal and in combat. And this has the potential to be a mass pump spell too, which is pretty exciting. So, unlike the last couple of cards, the floor here is actually fine and the ceiling's pretty good, giving it a C+. Next up, it's Tangle, which for 1 generic and a green is an uncommon instant. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. Each attacking creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. I've already mentioned that fogs aren't usually good and limited. It's because you go down a card and only delay the inevitable. Yes, I know we've all had moments where fog is amazing, like when your opponent swings out to kill you, you have lethal on the backswing, you cast it to blink their attack and kill them on your turn, and all of that sounds awesome, and they can do that, but that is an incredibly narrow use case, and it's a virtually dead card for most games. Tangle does add the doesn't untap thing to the mix, which is an upgrade. It means it does a little more than delay the inevitable, or at least delays it a little longer, but you're still dependent on your opponent swinging the right way to make this useful. Keep in mind also that the tap effect is symmetrical, so if something happens and you decide to use it when you're attacking, your creatures won't untap, so don't do that. I think this is a D. Next up, it's Alibu, Ancient Witness, which for 3 generic, a red and a white, is a 4/5 legendary artifact creature golem at mythic rare. Other artifact creatures you control have haste. Whenever 1 or more artifact creatures you control attack, Alibu deals X damage to any target and you scry X, where X is the number of target artifacts you control. This set does not have a prominent artifact theme at all. There are only 8 artifact creatures in the main set and only 25 artifacts overall, some of which are pretty hard to tap, like equipment. So I don't see this delivering in a big way. That said, the attack trigger is legit. Even if your only artifact in play is Alibu, if this were just a 5-mana 4/5 that does 1 damage and scries 1 every time it attacks, it would be a pretty good card, and that's the baseline. Sometimes you'll get more value out of it when you do have some of those other artifact creatures around. It is an interesting card because it would probably be a bomb in a really artifact-heavy set, because in that kind of set, it wouldn't be that hard for you to trigger this the turn you play it and get that going right away. In this set, it's going to be hard. This is very likely your only artifact creature. So most of the time, like I said, it's just going to be pinging 1 and scrying 1, which again is a fine baseline, and it does have a higher ceiling than that. I think it's a B-. And our last card is Terminate, which for a black and a red is an uncommon instant. Destroy target creature. It can't be regenerated. This is a great removal spell. It can even kill Skithiryx because it stops regeneration. That's the only card in the set where that sentence matters. But being 2 colors does make it a little less attractive than similar monocolored removal. But if you're in black-red, you would play as many of these as you can get your hands on, giving it a B-. All right, so that does it for the Spider-Man and Through the Omenpaths set review. I have now covered every single card you're going to be able to see in your play boosters, whether you're playing on Magic Arena or at the pre-release. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future videos, including more videos about this limited format, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to catch up on the rest of the set review, you should see a playlist on your screen shortly. Thanks for watching.